Welcome to LFS 202, Improving Data Liquidity in Roche's Personalized Healthcare Platform. I'm Maureen Chu, AWS Technical Account Manager in our Healthcare Life Sciences group, and will introduce Kazi in a few minutes. The field of artificial intelligence dates back to 1955, where it was far ahead of its time. For a reference point, it was in 1951, 75 years after Alexander Graham Bell's first patent, that you could self-dial a phone call from New York to LA after area codes were introduced, effectively extending the telephone address space. Imagine AI trying to get off the ground in the 60s with a computing landscape contemporary to rotary telephones. Early hype for AI led to huge disappointments and funding cuts, resulting in two distinct AI winters in the 70s and again in the 90s. Despite numerous setbacks, the pace of innovations in AI software and silicon designs took off. Who would have thought that autonomous navigation would have great consumer relevance, or that we would use speech recognition on a daily basis to set timers or turn on lights? Fast forward 25 years from the last AI winter to 2017, when Economist cover story stated, "The world's most valuable resource is no longer oil, but data." We've been witness to the acceleration of technology to produce and process biological and health data at scale. Coupled with powerful machine learning and analytics platforms, here we are today, poised for unprecedented breakthroughs in the areas of precision medicine and personalized healthcare. One example where the convergence of data and biology is yielding better health outcomes is an ML-based radiology application at UC San Diego that scans chest x-rays. Their anecdotal success story, which flagged pneumonia and a derivative COVID diagnosis when neither was initially suspected, holds important promise that will benefit patients and physicians. Our collaboration with UC San Diego enabled them to go from research project to clinical study at scale in just 10 days. Whether your job role is scientist or data scientist, AWS has a breadth of services to help you build data models or data lakes with a global reach and partner ecosystem with over 1.5 million marketplace subscriptions in use. You get to focus on your core business value instead of wrestling infrastructure and integration challenges. Being able to go from idea to POC in minutes democratizes the opportunity for disruptive innovation, as the same services are available to anyone on demand. Targeting for better health outcomes through personalization is more important than ever. And that's why it's my pleasure to introduce Mustaf Hussain Kazi, better known as Kazi to his colleagues and friends. Kazi is the global head of personalized healthcare informatics at Roche Genentech. He has more than 20 years of experience in pharmaceutical, high-tech, petrochemicals, and renewable energy, and has held positions in enterprise information systems, strategic consulting, business development, and manufacturing. Currently, Kazi leads a team that is defining, building, and implementing the technologies that will drive greater research and development at Roche and deliver more personalized care and access for patients around the world. He's here to share more about how Roche is using data management, advanced analytics, and collaboration capabilities on AWS to enable meaningful data liquidity at scale in support of its personalized healthcare mission. Kazi, I'll now hand it over to you.
Thank you, Maureen. Let me start with personalized healthcare. Personalized healthcare is an approach that actually puts the patient in the center of the healthcare system. The focus for personalized healthcare is twofold. One is to develop precision or personalized medicine for the patients, and the second one is to develop tools and solutions that will actually improve the patient care. And all of these are using the data and analytics technologies that Maureen talked about. So if I look at history of personalized medicine, or sometimes it's also called precision medicine. In the 1990s, we had the era of blockbuster drugs. So these were the drugs that actually were mass marketed, one size fits all drugs, and they applied to a large segment of population. But we all know these drugs not work. They did not work all the time. So sometimes in the 80s and 90s, we had these advances in biology and understanding of disease heterogeneity. And this is where we could actually create new diagnostic tools that actually then created subpopulation of patients. And then we created new medicines that actually were targeting certain subpopulation of the patients. And that worked for a while. And especially in cancer, if you look at, for example, in Roche, we have a drug called Herceptin that was, that came out in the 2000 time frame. And this drug actually uses HER2 positive breast cancer biomarkers. And any women who has HER2 positive breast cancer actually can get this drug, and it has a significant impact on the patients at that point. But then as we look in the future, there are more and more individualized treatments coming up, and they are all based on data and analytics. So now we are moving from really like mass marketed drugs, one size fits all, to much more individualized, personalized therapy. And the big driver for that is obviously the disease and the biology and understanding of that, but also the data and analytics and technology. And that's, as a technologist, I think that's one of the most exciting things that we can see in our lifetime. So if we go out in the healthcare today, this is the view of the patient that we see. And so the patient goes from the primary care to specialty care to hospital to infusion center. And the view of the patient is very fragmented, very blurry. So our approach is that, having this, what we call deep and broad data sources, can actually give us much more precise view of the patient and the disease history. So for example, if you take genomics, with the next genomic sequencing technologies and companies like Foundation Medicine, we can have a report of the patient, and it gives them the biomarker, the genomic profile, and then also a nice report where the physician can look at it and make sense out of that particular information. Same thing with EHR systems now being rolled out. We can actually see the patient characteristics. We can see the outcome of the patient, like what happened to them after they took a certain drug. Same thing with digital health and telemedicine. Now telemedicine actually gives us really good view into the patient, and they can see the physician remotely. But the digital health tools actually provide us the sensors and the different signals when the patients are not in the doctor's office. And that way we can really cover the patient journey end to end, when they are in the doctor's office or when they are not. Imaging is another big technology that's actually coming along. Has been there for a while, but for example, algorithms developed on CT scan or PET scan or MRIs can actually detect the disease, but then also predict what will happen, if the disease will progress or not. So all of this data now is being available to us, and this is what's driving the change in healthcare, both developing new medicines, but also developing new tools that will help in the patient care. And finally, we get a really high-res view of the patient and the disease and the treatment outcomes using this data. Right? So this is a very simple picture, but gives an idea of what we mean by having this data together, right? So we coined this term meaningful data at scale, where we bring in data for a given patient over a period of time. We bring in the clinical data, either from clinical trials or from real-world data when they visit the physician. We bring in all their omics data and the biomarker data that is being generated once they go through the genomic testing. We also bring in imaging data, like for example, MRI, CT scan, PET scan, X-rays, and any results that are coming from those data sets. And then finally, we also can bring in data from digital health data sets. So sensor data collected from your iPhone, or even like simple applications. And all of this data combined, laid down over a period of time, we call it longitudinal data set for a given patient. And then we can combine all of those patient data and combine that with similar patients that had a similar disease journey. And now we get a really comprehensive data set where we can look across patients and see, what the previous patient's journey has been, what drugs have worked, what drugs didn't work. And that way we can come up with like new hypotheses, new analysis. And this is the term we coined, meaningful data at scale. What that means is different than big data, where we collect data which is of high quality, but very focused on answering, certain scientific questions. And the scale is enough to be able to do different type of analysis and statistics. So the key to unlocking the potential of the meaningful data at scale is actually to apply these different advanced analytics techniques. And this requires, high amount of compute power, but also like various type of tools. And once we can give these tools and the compute power to the statisticians and the data scientists, they can do different type of analysis. They can run statistical analysis, they can do deep machine learning, they can even like look at computer vision and different type of analysis in that area, genomic analysis. So this actually unlocks a lot of insights that actually have potential to transform healthcare. And from a healthcare perspective, it can benefit both. It can benefit the pharma companies and the pharmaceutical companies, the drug development, where we can really look at the patient, understand deeply, the disease profile. We can also develop new diagnostics that actually can be used by the physician to diagnose a disease, and then apply the new therapies that are applicable for that particular diagnostics. From a clinical trial perspective and drug development perspective, we can actually make decisions early on whether a certain experimental drug will work with a certain patient profile or not. And then we can do our trials much more faster and cheaper. And you're all aware of the COVID discussions and the trials that are going on for the COVID vaccine. And from a drug development perspective, trials take the longest time because you have to go through a certain number of patients to prove that that drug works for that particular patient population. And so any reduction that we can do in the trial timing and make the trials faster, we can actually benefit a lot more patient in a much smaller time frame. And then at the very end, our healthcare ecosystem is pretty expensive, and the burden of disease on the society is very high. So what we are also trying to do is optimize the care. So as soon as the patient gets diagnosed, they can get the best treatment possible so the disease doesn't progress. And also we don't actually burden our healthcare system as well. And so all in all, actually it benefits the entire society and the patients. So this is our vision and what we inspire. So we want a world where all of the patients, every single patients that we have, they get the best possible care in the fastest time possible and the best drugs that are available in the market. And so how do we enable this now? So we have this idea of building what we call this end-to-end engine, and the engine has on both sides patients being benefiting from this. So we bring in meaningful data at scale into this engine, and the data could come from clinical trials, it could come from real-world data, and has different type of data sets, as I talked about, like genomics and imaging. We can actually then apply advanced analytics techniques to the data, and then generate insights and value out of the data, and that could actually help both R&D and finding new therapies faster and bring them to the market. And we can also benefit the patients and the healthcare system by improving access and personalized care. And that we feel would actually benefit more patients, and this is the way the engine actually functions, where more and more patients benefit by it, and more data we collect, more analysis we do and more insights and value that we generate in the healthcare system. So the first key for this is the data scientist and the scientist. And Genentech and Roche are very science-driven company. And we have about 1,500 data scientists in the company, but we have a large amount of scientists that actually work with the data scientists. And this is key to making personalized healthcare a reality. So from a platform perspective, what we did was we built this really next generation platform that can scale up and down depending on the amount of data, depending on the type of compute you have. And it has basically 3 modules. So one is the data management module, where we can bring in data from multiple sources, process it automatically, and store it for analysis. Then we also bring in advanced analytics tools that actually the data scientists want. And we have a slew of tools that they can use, and unlimited amount of compute depending on the type of scientific questions they are trying to solve. So they can use the data, run advanced analytics, and generate insights. And the last part is actually the key of unlocking science, which is the collaboration and insights that we can share across Roche, but also then outside. And we believe in open science and making sure that we can all collaborate both within and outside of Roche. And because we work in different geographies, there are different regulations that we have to adhere to. And that's why the platform actually has adherence to all the different compliance regulations that we need to comply, and then also has the security and privacy shield that actually protect the patient data. So in data management, the goal for data management for us was actually to reduce the time it takes to bring the data from source all the way to making it available for analysis to the data scientists. So we have these different connectors that you can see on the left-hand side, where we connect to different data partners, either real-world data partners or academic institutions, or even to public and reference data sets. And we can bring the data into the platform, either batch load nightly or streaming, depending on what the data is. The middle portion of the engine is actually the heart of this whole platform, where we do a lot of automatic checks and curation. So I'll give you simple examples. We can check if the files are coming in, whether they are image file or whether they are EHR files or whether they are claims data sets that come in. We can actually then also detect whether the images are for left eye versus the right eye. So we had classification gears that actually run that kind of algorithm on top of the images to classify the image, whether it's left eye, right eye image. We can also check, simple things like blood pressure, and is it is that range within the right blood pressure range, or is there an error in the data? So a lot of these very, very simple things, but actually that could cost a lot of time for the data scientists. We actually try and do it much more upfront. And then once the processing has been done for the data, it gets stored into a really scalable data management platform. So we actually reduce the time of actually bringing the data on from start to finish. So for images, it used to take for each batch about 1 or 2 weeks to actually process that manually. And now with with the new system, we can actually do it within hours. And same thing with the EHR data, because EHR data is tabular data. That processing we can do within minutes. And when it used to take 1 or 2 days for someone to sit and manually go through the file and check them out. So that's a really big advancement that we have made so far in that. And this is work in progress. So this is where we are really focusing more and more to try and automate and make as much of this ingestion and data curation automatic as possible. And there is a lot of AI and machine learning that actually goes behind making these processes automated. So the second part is the advanced analytics. So this is where we actually have wide variety of AI tools. We have, for example, containerized R environment, where the data scientists can actually select the type of compute they want. They can take very small instances of AWS to all the way large GPU instances. They can actually also download their own packages that they want to run that particular analysis. And then they can actually do reproducible research. So anytime they have done the analysis, they can actually go back and reproduce that results again and again. So we have this very sophisticated system where they can do model development, validation, and then deployment. The other thing is, even though we use Amazon heavily, but we know the data would not be all in one place. So the analytics tools that we have are portable, and so we can take actually analytics to the data. And so the same research and the analysis that they're done on the Amazon environment, they can actually run it on-prem or any other cloud platform. So that's the beauty of this analytics engine, where it is obviously like leveraging the power of cloud, but where there is a need, we can actually, almost like a briefcase, take the tools and take them to the data sets. So the scientific collaboration is, as I said, to design actually to break the silos across the organization. And in the past, we would have data scientists doing their own research. They would have their own data set. And once they do the research, they would publish the papers out. But what we want to do was break the silo and really, create this platform of peer and shared learning and community building. So what the collaboration platform does, it allows, the data scientists come in. They can search for the different type of data that's available to them. They can use the type of tools that I described in the previous slide, and then generate insight. And these insights they can share across within their project team, but then at some point they can also share with other project teams within Roche and outside of Roche. We also build this data challenge platform where it's almost like a Kaggle kind of platform, but it's more internal, where we can run data challenges. And it's available to anyone within Roche. They can sign up through the platform. They can run their own data challenges. And it gives them the flexibility, again, to choose different type of environments that are required for different type of data challenges. So this actually unplugged a lot of the insights and and removed like the different silos that we had within the company. And we are still trying to socialize this platform much more within the company, so that way we can really create this truly open collaboration, for the data science. So let me go briefly into the different components that we use on Amazon. And this is a very small subset of component, but these are some of the relevant ones that we use quite heavily. So we have the different components that we use for the security and operations. Amazon Guard Duty, the secrets manager we use quite a bit. And on the data platform, we use Airflow quite a bit in terms of running the ETLs. But then we have most of our data on S3 because that's one of the very versatile storage that we think we can use on Amazon. And then our tabular data actually uses, we use Redshift quite a bit in that. And then we started using Neptune and RDS and other data stores as well. But between S3 and Redshift, I think those are like our core, I would say like the data hubs. And then everything else is more, complementary to this like central data storage. In terms of advanced analytics, we are a heavy user of our Jupyter Notebook. But then we also have high performance compute on the cloud. And this is where we can do deep learning, and we have tools like Keras and TensorFlow and different other tools that we need for the deep learning environment. And all of those are actually running on two primary Amazon region, one in the US, one in Europe, and this gives us the geographical spread depending on the type of data that we have and the geographical compliance requirements that we need to adhere to both Europe as well as for the US data sets. This slide gives, I almost call it like an X-ray vision of the data analytics platform. And basically we can bring data from the different EHR systems, digital systems, and depending on the data type, they run through different pipelines. So the first thing that happens is when the data comes into Roche, we actually put it in a quarantine zone, and this is where we run different type of checks on it. So the antivirus check, making sure that if the data was not supposed to have personalized information, then we remove the patient information from the data. Even like from images, we have ability to remove patient names that might have been scribbled on top of an image, and all of that is done in the quarantine zone. Data quality is also checked in there, and if if some of those criteria don't match, then we can send the data back to the source, and we don't in some ways contaminate the remaining part of the pipeline. So once the data has been gone through the quarantine zone, then we run through the pre-curated and the curated zone, and where some more processing of data happens in those areas. And then once the data has been checked and it's curated and the quality is complete, then all of the data is published into a data catalog where the data scientists can go in and search this catalog, and it's open within Roche, where the scientists can go and look at the different data that's available to them for analysis. So then they can actually use the different tools like RStudio or Jupyter to connect back to the Redshift environment and pull the data, or to directly to S3 or any other data store where the data was actually residing. On the top, we have the shared services that actually goes across the different areas, and these are services that actually allow us to then bring multiple of these data analytics areas like together and have a much more common and harmonized view. Right? We use Splunk quite a bit in terms of audit and logging, and that has worked out well because it gives us like good reports and dashboards that we can then act on. So why did we choose Amazon? And so Roche is a big company. We operate in more than 100 countries, and we have to adhere to different regulations. So one of the things choosing Amazon was the global presence and the regulatory compliance, because when we work with Amazon, they have a footprint in pretty much all parts of the world, including China, Africa, Asia, all parts of Europe, US, and South America. So that was one of the big considerations for us, because as we scale out, we want to make sure that we could actually have this platform running on multiple data centers throughout the world. The second one was the availability of technology capabilities. So Amazon does quite a bit of innovation in terms of the platform, and that's something that we need as we go forward. And so that was another criteria where we felt there was this really good mix of very mature technology capabilities, but a good engine to continue to innovate this platform. And I feel in the next 10 to 20 years, this will continue on, because we'll have a lot of innovation coming out to the cloud, and having a partner that has that ability and also the mindset is really helpful. The third one was the technical skills in the market, because we needed skills both in US and Europe, but any part of the world where we operate. And having a community and having good skill sets available in the market actually is a good booster for us. So those were the big reasons why we actually chose Amazon and the partnership with Amazon. So as we have been working with AWS for now almost like I would say 3 to 4 years, but in this particular platform for about 2 years, the key enablers were the expertise that Amazon has brought to the table for us, both within the professional services but also the product groups. The second one was the spirit of collaboration and partnering and co-creating and innovating. And then also the flexibility, because our demands has been varying at different point in time, and we need someone to actually help us and be very flexible as a partner. And that's something that I felt Amazon provided, where we can go in and say, hey, look, this is the issue we have. How can we solve it? And there was a good deal of enthusiasm within the company to actually partner and collaborate with us on different topics. So where we are now from our 2 or 3 years journey is this is a field, as I said, will continue to evolve. So we have been able to seize the opportunity now, and I feel that we'll continue to innovate as we go for in the next 3 to 4 years, especially in the technology and platform area. But data is not easy to deal with, and especially when you are dealing with healthcare data and different type of multimodal data. Those technologies are continuing to change, continuing to evolve. So I would say we are still learning how to handle the data obstacles, because we find issues like every single time, and then we figure out a way to solve it. And I think this would be a journey as the healthcare system evolves and as new technologies around genomics, digital come to play. We will have to deal with the data challenges and data obstacles. The other one is, big data is not the solution. We really need to find out what data sets we need, and then applying the right methods to the right question has been the key for us. So literally we start reverse, and going from question to the methods to the data actually has helped us a lot. And I think that's one of the key lessons learned for us. The other thing is the data interoperability, because we bring data from multiple sources, and each of the source has their own way of formatting the data, tagging it, standardizing it. So trying to really make this data interoperable has been a key for us. So looking at data standards, terminology services, and trying to see what actually are the things that we should really harmonize when we bring the data from multiple sources, has been a key focus for us, and we are continuing to invest in that whole area. And the last one, as I said, is the scientific collaboration. So this is where both within Roche we want to make sure the scientists collaborate, but also outside, because there are a lot of learnings that we can bring outside into the organization, and we can take some of the learnings that we have to the external world. And focusing on the collaborations both internally, externally has been the key. So the platform that we have built allows us to do both, collaborate more internally with the different data scientists, but then also collaborate externally with the external data scientists. And then finally, with Roche and Genentech, we focus on the patient, and that's our key mission, our key goal. All the medicines we develop are actually targeted towards them. So our dream is actually empowering a world where each and every patient can get the care that they need, they can get the medicine that they need, and making that a reality is something that we aspire for. So thank you so much for listening.